some people would refer to the OSI model as a blueprint for network layers. Why do you think it's become such a popular framework, especially for networking industrial control systems?
That's a very good question. I think when you bring up the topic of the OSI models, right? It depends on your background, right? So just like controls, if you get into controls, you can come from any kind of background. For a long time, I thought it was only electrical because that's all the people I was. But having gone through these different companies, I've seen, okay, you have process engineers, you have chemical engineers, you have even mechanical engineers, all
Sure.
come from different backgrounds to do controls. Just as you have that, when you start talking about networking and OT and IT and all that, you can have two different backgrounds in that. You might come from a traditional IT background, trying to learn plant force stuff, or you might be coming from a control side, dipping your hand into the IT world. And depending on which way you're coming from, depends on how you tackle it, I think, right? And what I have found is people who have a controls background, they don't understand the OSI model. However, an IT person does. So an
Sure.
IT person probably wouldn't emphasize the OSI model because it's second nature to them. They know that. That's not the part they have, difficulty with.
Sure.
To them, it's more like, okay, well, in IT world, security is the highest importance and availability is the lowest. And you go to our world and it's the opposite. I felt the need to dive into this to make sure there's an understanding of, hey, if I understand this side and I understand this side, I could be the negotiator, the broker of communication to say, hey, look, how can we address both needs and everyone be happy? That was kind of my drive of this. So to me, for a controls person, you really need the OSI model as a foundation to understand the rest of it. Especially if someone says, "Hey, go use Wireshark." Well, Wireshark's not going to make sense if you don't understand the different layers,
Right.
right? And so that's why I wanted to start there. I wanted to make sure we have that. For an IT person, it's not going to make any sense. Like they're
Right.
like, "Okay, this is kindergarten stuff to me,"
Sure.
right? But for a controls person, that's not where they started. That's not where they came from. That's not what they know. And so to lay a good foundation, I felt like the OSI model was very important framework to be able to talk about the other types of associated technologies.
Sure. Just kind of establishing a language.
Yes.
So they can. So I mean, we talk a lot about the IT and OT convergence, which keeps happening more and more with smart devices becoming a more commonplace. So I think that's a very important observation, and certainly the OSI model is one that is of considerable importance for controls engineers as they delve further into the need to just work with IT people or become part of that same organization. There's become a lot more crossover as well.
Absolutely.
You talked about migrating those systems. Do you have a preference between migrating control systems from one supplier to another, or just upgrading one system from the same supplier to the most recently available system?
I think there's pros and cons of both, to be honest with you. Yeah, typically it's going to be easier if you stay with the same manufacturer or same vague platform. A lot of the platforms, when they transition, it's going to be completely different anyways.
Right.
But
That's
one that
true.
comes in mind, if you're going from a PLC 5 to ControlLogix, they actually have hardware that you can put in place where you just plug it in. It's like you can utilize a lot of what's already there, so it makes the rewire a lot easier. But there's pros and cons to that too, right? So to me, it almost makes sense that if you're going to upgrade something as big as that, you'd want to upgrade everything. So in that case, I'm not sure it makes a difference. The only thing I could think would be a positive staying with the same platform is if it was going to look or feel the same or troubleshoot the same to either your maintenance people or your operators. But if that's not the
Right.
case, if it's going to be new no matter what, then the platform's not really going to matter. At least
Right.
to me, it's not. I'm going to make it work regardless. It's how much time are we going to also invest in the training for plant people. So,
Okay. You mentioned PLC 5. That's a great example. The PLC 5 from Allen Bradley was discontinued in 2017, And then the RS Logix 5 software is going to be discontinued at the end of this year. So Rockwell's customers have been advised for quite some time now to upgrade to ControlLogix. But you must still obviously find PLC5 controllers in use. And is there a rule of thumb that you have when you're confronted with devices that are obsolete or nearing the end of life? And how do you handle that kind of replacement, especially when migration to newer technologies, as you just hinted on mentioning, opens up a whole other can of worms where you have to retrain programmers, operators, and maintenance personnel?
Yeah, I think in those situations it's really difficult to think about it like this, but it's almost like you want to present the client with a list, right? Like one of the things I want to do is to go to a client site and make a list that here's all your controls devices, right? And then make a list of high priority, medium priority, low priority of upgrades. So you have a migration path. A lot of people don't do that. They just do it piece by piece. Oh, well, we have a problem with this, we need to replace this, and that's it. There's no overall scope. There's no like scheme, right? There's no plan. It doesn't make sense to just do one thing and not worry about everything else. On the other hand, you have to be budget minded too, and also time minded. If you're going to bring down production, you got to work that out too, right? But in that case, the PLC 5 is a solid thing. It's still out there kicking, right? So a lot of people want to, say it's old, you need to replace it just because it's old. But just because it's old doesn't mean it's bad. I mean, I'm still here. I'm old, right? But PLC 5 is a solid PLC. It really is. Now, my push to replace it is like what you said. Okay, you're gonna discontinue support of the hardware, the software. Okay, there's a need to want to upgrade that because you're gonna pay 2-3 times more on eBay to find spare parts, right? So in those cases, trying to come up with a plan that's going to make sense, not just for that one project. Like you got to look beyond just the one project and say, okay, well, this will be the new standard. We're going to go to ControlLogix, L8 or whatever it is, and make that path for the other things too, so that the training's not going to be, oh, well, we upgraded this to this, but 2 years from now when we upgrade this other one, it's to something different. Now we have to get, train the guys again.
Right.
It's like you really got to think about things more than just one little section, I think.
Sure. I'm not asking you to necessarily pick a side unless you want to, but there's there's been a debate most recently, especially with the younger generation coming into the workforce. Traditionally, the IEC 61131-3 program, those 5 programming languages have been prevalent, but now with PC-based control becoming more and more utilized, there's things like C, C++, Java, Python, and the like. As an integrator, do you need to know them all, or do you need to just specialize in one or a few of them, or do you have a preference either side? What's your take on that?
I think that from an integrator standpoint, I'm going to gravitate towards the traditional, ladder, function block, stuff like that, because that's what I'm used to. But
Right.
does a systems integrator need to know all of them? No, and there's some system integrators all they do is ladder, and some all they do is structured text. In fact, if you're going to go find a Siemens PLC outside of the United States, I guarantee you there's not going to be ladder in there, right? Just because it's just a different way that people think.
Right.
As far as like gravitating towards one language, I mean, it's going to be specific to the application, right? I kind of see like they're tools in your toolbox, right? If you only know one, hey, I could use this hammer. If I need a hammer, I'm the guy to call. If you need a
Right.
screwdriver, I can't help you. So you're
Sure.
almost disabling yourself if you limit yourself to just one or two programming languages. I think the same could be applied if you're talking about typical software programming, right? Okay, if you're like, hey, I don't want to learn any of that. Well, when it comes to scripting inside of an HMI, well, you're going to be at a disadvantage, right?
Sure.
Um, do you have to know them all? I don't think so. And most software developers don't know them all, right? They might have a top 3 or top 5 that they know, and that's what they do. And
Hmm.
you just go with the demand of whatever the client or whatever the project demands, right? Like I've learned this because of this. I've learned this because of this, right? I've done way more function block because of plant BAS, right? So
Sure.
it's just what happens. What the projects that come your way kind of determine what you need to learn, right?
Right. Yep, absolutely. So what about network protocols? We have discussed before, there's so many different protocols. I could rattle off, 10 of them in a heartbeat. Some of them are deterministic, some are not. Some of them are open, some are not. Some are known for speed, some are, some have latency that because speed isn't necessary. But how do you assess the pros and cons of a different protocol? Um, and is that choice of a network protocol, is that typically made, is that you, is that the customer, is that the application?
And I think this is a very hard topic. It's a very good question, but it's a hard topic because people are looking for the it answer, right?
Right,
This is what you do. Always do this. If you don't do
right,
this, you're wrong, right? We would like it to be, that black and white, but unfortunately, it's not. There's so many variables that come into play here, right? Whether it's application, whether it's client, whether it's platform, whether it's hardware, all these different things come into play, and then who's handling it? Most of the time with like OT type networks, the very first question I'm going to ask is who is going to maintain this network? Because that's going to determine the level of complexity that's going to be involved, right? Because if it's
right,
just, hey, the controls guy who knows nothing about OT, he's in charge. Well, then you don't necessarily want to put all these, managed switches with all these, custom CLI type configurations in there because they're going to scratch their head to be calling you. If you're the
right,
one supporting it, or they have their own OT, or their IT is willing to manage it, well, then maybe you can get a little bit more sophisticated. And so there's a lot of things that come into play there. And then there's certain hardware that might have specific requirements, right? I'm thinking of was it Kinetics by Alan Bradley? They're servos. They
mhm,
have a certain thing that they have to use. It has to be this, or it's not going to work, right? And
right,
so in those cases, it's not really a decision. It's this is what you have to use because
right,
if you want this hardware to work, this is how, right?
right,
So when you think about all those, it's not that hey, this is the magic protocol. Always use this. And most, Alan Bradley people are going to say Ethernet IP, right?
right. Yes,
So,
yes. Well, and then there's been the push toward open protocols and different systems. Things
mhm,
like um, OPC UA and
mhm.
IO Link and even MQTT. Which is a completely different beast. But as we said, there are so many available, and the application and so many variables in terms of which one is going to be utilized in the first
Mhm.
place.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yes.
But I think one thing to think about, those open protocols have a place. They're good for things like transmitting data, or if you're going to, record to a historian, or if you're going to pop it up on a report or a graphic. Okay, those might work. But if you're doing control, some of these protocols, there's a reason that you want to use a specific protocol. Being open isn't necessarily a good thing in those times.
Right.
So,
Right. Right. And there's always determinism when you're talking about a control
mhm.
system as well. All right. Well, great stuff, Patrick. Thanks so much for joining me. It's been a real pleasure.